Any that's black? No. They all have milk?
Yeah, they all have milk.
This is Targansky, Marilyn Targansky, and my cousin Yiddy. Before refrigeration.
Let's see the picture.
It's the Lipster house I'm thinking of. You're right, it was the Lipster house.
The ice truck. They used to deliver ice, and we'd go for the chips. It was the ice chips.
Very good. I mean, as a matter of fact, you know, I should have done a better job of this. I found this just recently. This was done about 1934.
What?
But I had a...
I think that's great. I'm born as Bella Buckman. I'm now Belle Wiggins. And my parents came out here in the early 30s. They were introduced to the place through Mr. Oakman. I don't know whether you remember him. Of course. Yeah, my father and Oakman were good friends. And my father had this dream of going to a place that was like a community where you raised all your own food and everybody shared and that kind of thing. He had this dream from, I guess, his Russian background. And we came here in the early 30s. The big push really was that my older brother had a lung problem, and the doctors felt he either had to go to a sanatorium or to get out of the city. So combined with my parents' interests and Oakman's friendship and my brother's illness, we came out here. We lived out here all year round. We came in the early 30s. There were about 5 families who lived here all year round, and the Flammenbaums, the Slaters, the Lipsters, the Buckmans, and how many have I got there? 4. Who did I leave out? There was another family. Oh, well, I said the Slaters. There's another family there. It'll come to me. And we went to school out there. In fact, I was telling Vera that that community center, now nursery center, I guess, we had like 3 classes in one room, and we really enjoyed the experience, and we loved Goldsbridge in the winter. In fact, more than the summer, because in those days this little elite, I don't know if we call them elite, but we were separated from the village. See, being Jewish and a nudist colony, and what else were we called? And radicals, that was enough to, yeah, and Jewish. There was a fair amount of anti-Semitism in those days. So we were really, became quite close to each other. And then everybody in those days called each other comrade. Comrade Buckman, Comrade Zakar, Comrade Oakman. Everybody referred to each other. That's how we were. And also, I don't know whether anybody remembers it, but I remember it distinctly because of my own school experience. But in the colony, when you went to the daycare center, they raised the hammer and sickle, and we would sing "Arise, ye prisoners of starvation." That was, yeah. So that when I started school in Goldsbridge, and we had to sing the Star Spangled Banner and say, "Our Father who art in heaven," it was an eye-opener. I had no idea that the anthem of the United States was "Arise, ye prisoners."
Well, I'm going to continue doing the interviews, but I'm just curious. Does anyone else remember "Arise, ye prisoners of"? Yes. Should we just sing it to sing it?
Arise, ye prisoners of salvation. Arise, ye wretches of the earth. For justice thunders condemnation.
A better world's in birth. No more tradition change shall bind us. No more enthralled. The earth shall rise on new foundations. We have been taught we shall be all. 'Tis the final conflict. Let each stand in his place. The international front shall be the human race.
All right. Okay. All right. I'm sorry. Okay. Tell me your name, please. I'm sorry.
I was Eleanor Weissman. My name is now Eleanor Baxter.
Yes.
We had the Weissman House. It was built in 1931 with the Margolins. It was a duplex, a double house, and I still say the initial contract between the carpenter and my father, and it was $500, $125 to be paid when the foundation was laid, $125 when the walls were up, $125 when the roof was put up, and I don't know where the last $125 was, maybe when the windows came in. And when I was going through the house 5 years ago, 3 years ago, whenever, I saved some of these little things, including the King's Lumber Company. The statements of, I don't know, 6 pounds for nails, or 6D, whatever that means in carpenter language. Anyway, some of my early memories, one is particularly salient. My brother and I, my parents stayed beyond Labor Day, I guess, and the cold water tap was turned off. There was a water tap about 30 feet out of the front door. So we went over to the Bookmans with a broomstick and a pail, and we pumped the water from their well and brought it back via, there was an apple tree and a stone path. And I also have very vivid memories of playing baseball.
That's right. Yeah.
And I was a little tomboy and I loved to play baseball. By then I was probably 10.
Yeah, there weren't enough guys. They had to take us there.
That's right. And I had a very clear idea of where the backstop was. I liked to hit. I didn't like to pitch. I liked to catch and hit. And I went down there the other day behind the barn, and darn it, the backstop wasn't there, and I was totally disoriented until I looked across toward the Blake's house, and there was the backstop. So I felt better.
I am Vera Fenster, now Rabushka, and the reason we came to Golden's Bridge were Bernie's parents. The Birndowns were friends of my parents, Helen and Ben, and we used to come up Christmas time and sit by the fire in their house and sing all night and have good times. And my parents decided, although they had literally no money, they wanted a place in the country for their children. Actually, for me. There wasn't the second one yet. We're 7 years apart. And so we came up in, the first time we came here was 1939, and in 1940, my parents decided to buy an acre. And my mother wanted a place in the colony that was high up. So we walked and we walked, and the road at that time stopped at the lake. It didn't go all the way up Road 2. So there was some kind of a path, because I think the Gottlieb House was up already.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, and then the road was extended there, and then there was a path to the top of the hill, and my mother said, this is what I like. I like the view, and you could see maybe 50, 75 miles north. You could see all the hills that we can't see now. And she said, this is what I like. And people would say, you're out in the wheat fields. There was a beautiful, beautiful birch grove in the back. And the problem was that we didn't really know where the acre was. And there was just a path through the woods, which didn't bother them because they never drove. We always came up by train from 14th Street, and we would go to 125th Street to save the 25 cents or whatever it was between 42nd and 20th. We'd come up with the Pekla, and we would walk from town, and they decided, well, we're going to have a house. So my father was a writer, my mother was a teacher. They'd never done anything of this sort. But they put the shovel in the ground, and they dug, and my father did everything, and mother. And I think that's the tradition that I grew up with, and I'm still schlepping the rocks that she schlepped. And I find now little stones. My mother liked to take stones about that size and put a little yellow dot on top, like a flower in the stone. And now when I'm digging, sometimes I find my mother's stones. It's like a pet rock.
Well, our family came to Golden's Bridge Colony, but we didn't come just individually, we came in mass. There was the Birnbaums, the Goldenbergs next door, the Rosenbergs, eventually the Feinsteins near you, and my Aunt Rita Sachs, may she live and be well, is still here. Oakman. So we had about 4 or 5 members of the clan here. And since it was the 20s, we're talking about before the crash of 29, everyone had some money, a little bit, and we built this paradise. And then the crash came, the Depression, and my father lost his business, and where could we go? To the summer home. And the summer home was a place without it had electricity, but it had no running water, no heating, and an outhouse. And the water was at Oakman's well, and we had to go and take the water in the snow and bring it in. And I was about then going to high school, and the Flammenbaums and the Bookmans, we all waited at the road for the bus. But I was the only one in high school, the only boy, the only Jew in Katona High, and that was an old wooden building. And of course, Katona High, the boys played hardball, baseball. And the first time I got up, my team of the seniors we were with, in back of me, I'm standing there with the bat and they're hollering to the opposite people pitching at me with the hardball. Hit the Jew bastard in the head.
Wow.
I mean, we weren't that welcome in Katona, right?
That's right.
Hit the Jew bastard in the head. Well, thank God that there were those people there. But, you know, pretty soon we opened a little store in the barn, and I was the milkman, and I carried milk with 2 big buckets, and I delivered to each one who was here. And I'll go around the house and I'll tell you about why I remember each family and tell you the best of them. The Riders were German refugees. No?
No.
We just went to Germany.
Went to Germany. Anyway, my father had a store in New York, and my father's store got to know the Riders in the mid-20s, 29, 30. Yes.
And they were building the George Washington Bridge. You had to close your store.
Right, we had to close our store because of that. So the Riders came up, and I remember when they came, you know, we used to talk about the old times and where they lived in Manhattan, and then they came here. Now the Bookmans, her father was the best carpenter. He was the Da Vinci of the woodworkers. Lipster was number 2, but Bookman was number 1. He was a very quiet man, and was known as this special man who could do very fine work. That's the truth.
Out as part of it before I could get my junior life.
You know, I learned to swim very, very early because Esther was my heroine. She was a gorgeous swimmer. She looked gorgeous in a bathing suit, her hair down to her tuchus, and I wanted to be like Esther. I learned to swim at 6, and I had to take the raft test.
Yes.
And at that time, I had to swim across the lake and back 3 times.
That's right.
And it was July 4th, and they got everybody out of the water, and everybody was standing on the beach, and I did my 3 times across the lake and back. And when I looked up, I was so embarrassed that everybody was watching me that I went underwater from the ropes to the shore. My earliest swimming memory.
The lake was very important. We were so proud of it that one day during the Spanish Civil War, they ran a big festival here to help the Republic in Spain. And they brought buses from New York. But Mr. Cooper, who was a photographer and a mover and a shaker, he decided that just the path wasn't good to go down. So to get ready for that big event, the steps which are to the lake were poured that day so that we could have the people who were coming up from the city in buses to help the Spanish Republicans, anti-fascist people. It was a big event, and every time I go down those steps to look at them, I says, Cooper's stuff still stands strong. There's not a chip in those steps. It was done very well.
Daddy, I wonder if I can just expand on that story a little bit.
Please.
Because before the steps were poured, it was the teenagers that Cooper organized to clear the ground, to dig out the rocks. It was a rocky incline to go down to the lake. And we kids, during the week, and at that time I was coming weekends, we worked that land under Cooper's direction. And it was finally finished for this event. But there is an aftermath to that I always like to tell, because I like to call those the steps that led to nowhere. Because for some reason, probably the Zachon-Cooper politics and the anger at each other, that entrance was fenced off, and we were forced still to come down on the rocky path alongside of the bathrooms. The tenants the excuse was that people should know where the bathroom was.
I'm gonna get.
That was the way to come in.
Do you recall the building of the lake? Is that?
Yes, I was there when it happened.
Tell me about what the people in the community did to not just build the lake, but the roads as well. Tell me a little bit about that time. Can you?
They raised money.
Well, we needed the lake, and we picked this spot which was near between Lilienthal. There was a valley, and this was the best place to have the lake. This was unsold property. A few cliffs on one side, and we got together and we hired scrapers and
Mr. White.
Mr.
White was the
Mr.
engineer.
White, right. And I watched them dig all of this up. We built a dam right by it
was Peter.
Pejersky. And it was the most, to me, it was the nicest thing to see this thing fill up with water. It took I think it took about a month. And this was what they call reservoir water. This same water went into the reservoir. That's how clean it was.
There springs coming
There
out?
were springs in the back. There were springs in the back. You could actually see beautiful place to swim in. And really coming from a crowded area in New York and swimming in clean water and fresh air, this was about the best place, really.
Tell me.
I know that you want about the physical plan, but I have to talk about the political.
Yeah, please.
Just very briefly.
Okay, go ahead. I was going to get to that. I was going to get to
how important the politics were in this community. I don't even want to talk about the negatives, you know, the Trotskyites and the communists and the Lovestonites and then those who left the Forbits and those who read the Freiheit. That's not. But the Saturday nights in the barn were very special, and the other occasions when mostly the women would raise money with nasharais. Everybody brought their own homemade meichels and raised money for whatever.
It was the Women's Council.
Exactly, but the men were also working and the women were here with the children. But every Saturday night there would be another cause. And always they would say, who's giving the first, $25, who's giving the next $10. There was always a collection, whether it was for the Daily Worker or the Freiheit or the Scottsboro Boys or Tom Mooney or
Russian War Relief.
Russian War Relief, exactly. And it was the dress manufacturers, the couple that we had here, like Pechersky and Blaschow, who was the red, yes. They always gave the first 25 or the first 10.
Oh, yeah.
Wisniewski. Exactly. He was the Manischewitz matzah king, right?
Did we eat Manischewitz product?
Right. We always knew. And then, of course, those who were the proletarians, gave the $1 and the $2. But every week it was another very important cause. And that's, I think, that made us able to survive into the 50s and 60s when so many other communities of like-minded people who had wonderful intentions never made it. All of the colonies in the Peekskill area went under. Goldensbridge, as far as I know, is one of the few, if not the only one in this whole area that survived the kind of oppression that people struggled and suffered through with the McCarthy, during the McCarthy period. And that gave us an enormous strength. I think that early gave us the strength to survive into the 80s and the 90s. And 4 and 5 generations are still, I think the only 5 generation are the Browns and the Dorfmans. But we are 4 generations here. My family was here, my husband Charlie and I. My in-laws were here, my children were born here, and my grandchildren were here. So, and we've got, that made us unique.
Speaking about politics, I just wanted to ask about Peekskill.
It's very important to remember this place might have gone under during the Depression. It had nothing to do with politics. It was a financial problem. The man who sold this colony, the land, was the only Jewish farmer in the world. Right. It was about a few hundred acres, Lieberman. And Lieberman had this farm. And he also had a farm down the next to us.
Yeah, 138.
But he also had a farm which was next to the AMP, a smaller farm that my cousin Al and I used to take care of his cows. And we fed the cows with stale bread that came up from New York. But the Lieberman people, that family that sold us this farm, had a mortgage on this colony for about $125,000. And during the Depression, no one had any money, and we couldn't sell acres. And the rich people, the Blaschows and a few others, all gave money so that the colony could pay for its mortgage and not be destroyed and gone under.
Yeah, right.
We did not have individual deeds yet for our houses. There was a collective deed for the entire land. And unless we saved the colony, we all would have lost, because after that, these people who gave money and the people who helped pay the mortgage, we were able to get individual deeds. And that's how you have individual deeds, because before there was this collective mortgage that owned all the land. Do you know that?
I think we had a Judge Palmer in Goldensbridge, who was a collector of taxes and a few other things. I don't know what happened with the Palmer family.
Henry Palmer still lives in Old Goldensbridge.
No kidding.
Yes.
I'm Matt Yalowitz. We heard of of Goldensbridge because a good friend, Sid Saul, in the true cooperative spirit, said, could we come and help him one afternoon? So Wendy and I schlepped up to Goldensbridge, and we helped Sid put up another wall. I think he had 20 walls in this one room, and it made for another room. I now understand there are 100 walls. This is the great wall house at Goldensbridge. Are they connected? And all the walls seem to be connected. And we learned about Goldensbridge, and we learned about Old Man Saul, a real pioneer. So we decided that we were going to rent first, and then we bought a house, Wendy and I.
To be more historical.
Yeah, okay.
Which was what happened was we were invited to and then we saw this community which was very appealing because of the beach and it just had a good communal feeling. And so we decided when our oldest was 2 and then middle was 2 months, we met Frida. And Frida was she was going off to Europe with her whole family, and so with another family in this tiny house in which we had to share a bathroom. They had 2 babies, we had 2 babies, we rented for the first time. And we were right near the beach, so we got to meet people. And then the following year, the people in our present house, which was at that time a shack, were leaving, and we loved the location, and we got to meet more people. We rented that for 2 years, and then we bought it. And again, it was the feeling of community, and we tried to encourage other people to come up, like the Weinstocks, who will tell you how they heard of Goldensbridge, and we got to meet everybody, mostly through the children, mostly through the kids, and of course we knew Arnie and Mira from way back. But at that time you weren't in Goldensbridge. No. That was not a related thing, and that's how it happened for us.
And was there something special about did you sense that there was anything different about this community from?
Yeah, it was a real feeling of a communal experience and a cooperative spirit, along with a certain sense of values that was very special and different than most communities we're familiar with.
Okay, I'm gonna just. How did you guys get up here?
Well, let me, if I can start. We met the Levines up at Chate's, which was also a progressive summer business community where we used to rent as well as tent. And through our kids, we became friendly, and they said, "There's this wonderful community which is also progressive, which we were looking for a politically progressive community, and it has this great day camp." And oh, well, I need a great day camp because we had 2 kids, and the Chate's day camp was really not up to what I wanted. And Artie will pick up about how we heard about the property, but we first rented, I think it was a Weissman house, and we co-shared with the Lehmans, and then the second year I think we rented at the Lukens. And then Arnie will tell you how we found our house.
We're still talking to the Lehmans. Co-sharing is not the easiest in the world.
You have to know we had separate apartments. Yeah, almost.
And then we stayed in a family who's still here now, Lukin, and we'll comment on that. But we saw this property next door, which looked not bad. Had a couple of things that were strange about it, which I'll explain in a minute. Somehow or other, and that particular person who told me was Sid Finkelman, yeah. Mira runs across him where, in a grocery store or something?
No. Very specific, Brooklyn Hip on Skemmerhorn
Brooklyn Hip, okay.
HIP.
And so she gets a tip that this house is for sale. The price was very good. There was a slight depression at the time. And I was part of that group that made money on the anti-poverty program. So I bought the house on poverty. And in poverty, for what was a song. It was such a bargain, who could turn it down? The only problem was that the house was occupied at the time by a man or family. He was in the garbage business, except he didn't throw his garbage in his truck. He threw it in the back. I am still picking up broken glass to this day. You know, Carson. So that's really how we came to acquire it. And I told the story, which I'd like to put on tape. We buy it from Friedman. Now, if I don't know who Friedman is, there were two Friedmans here, and they tell me he's such a lefty, he's the first capitalist that was able to allow to buy in the place here. All right, listen, that's good. I heard it was an old left-wing community. Bothered me a little bit since I was a Trotskyite, but all right, you put up with all kinds here. And Friedman concludes the deal. He shakes my hand. He says, "Congratulations, Mr. Eisen. You've bought on the 5th Avenue of Goldensbridge."
That's true.
And
true.
surprisingly, I knew another
Now,
family
since her
but
house
didn't
has
know.
moved up to Park Avenue.
I knew Dolph was one of my students, and I think poor Dolph went bananas. His professor was coming up. Would I change his grade? So,
I wouldn't say that.
no, what do you
You're
think?
only kidding, all
Right.
right?
Can't change from me.
But in any event, that was the story. And the early years were quite good, quite interesting. But it had other complications because we did not enter into the social fabric of the community by design, and that alienated us for many, many years until that changed for a lot of reasons. So now I'm a card-carrying Goldensbridger.
Show it.
As a kid, I always went away for the summer, whether it was to Bungalow Colony with my parents or years later to camp. And when Leslie was born, there was no way I was going to spend the summer in the city. So I knew about Goldensbridge because Dottie and Billy were here, and Dottie's mother and my mother were very close friends. And we came up, and the first summer we rented at Torma's, and that was an experience unto itself because she was the greatest thing. She arranged a babysitter for me. She made sure I went to all the activities. She introduced me to everyone. So it was through her that I really became, I knew the fabric of the community, and she's the one who got me working on the banquet. So now you know how long I'm doing the banquet. We bought, and the following year, our house was for sale. We had seen a lot of houses throughout the community. There was a house on Hillside, which I think is still for sale or still empty, and a number of others, and we were very happy when our house came along up on the 5th Avenue of the Colony.
I'd never heard of Goldensbridge in my life. I was a summer camper at Kinderland, and after that fell through, I got too old, so I started using summer weekends at Camp Unity, straight up 22. And some friends of mine named the Bobbeds were renting up here in a place called Goldensbridge, and they said, on your way up, can't get lost, stop in for a few minutes on your way up. So I did, and I looked at it, and they were renting also at the Tilly Ackerman mansion. I think it was 5.
Oh, with my little...
Yeah, 5 people in one room, and plus Tilly Ackerman. She was in a permanent boarder. So I came up, and I thought it was a very nice place. They took me around and showed me. I had no experience with Kocha lanes anyway. So it was a fancy Kocha. So I said, that's very nice. Then Dottie and I got married, and we had to find a place for the summer. We were going to go. We had one child. And I happened to mention this, so we stopped off one weekend, and I remember, I think Alan Ziva Greendale were renting. I think he was lifeguarders. It must have been
the summer of 55.
55 or 6, yeah.
Bobby and Herman were at Commissaric.
And they were at Mel Brown. No, it wasn't Mel Brown yet.
It was a Commissaric. That's right.
No, Alan Ziva were renting at what became Mel Brown's.
I don't know.
Yeah, because the living room at that time was on the log, and it kept, modern design. So we rented in 57. We rented at a place called Goldstein.
Mrs. Goldstein on the corner of Pond
and Hillside.
And Hillside, because it had a little white picket fence. And I had a baby of a year and a half, figuring she couldn't go too far.
Well, she did go too far. She managed to get under the fence and end up on the other side of Torma's.
Through the bushes, she followed the dog and was sitting in Torma's living room playing with the dog when I found her.
Yeah. So then the following year we rented the Goldberg sisters because we wanted a slightly better place. And then Mel Brown and Gloria had bought their house at that time, and they say, please rent by us, rent by us. We don't like the tenant we had before, whatever. So we said, look, we got an infant. He says, I don't care, it doesn't bother me. So we went to Mel Brown's and we stayed there about 75 years. I don't know.
We stayed there 13 years. We lived with them for 13 summers. And then Label and Rini had bought the Rosenberg had bought the Rosenberg house. And they noticed that the Milstein Sea House was empty. There was nobody living there.
Just rabbits indoors.
And Joe Gladstone had once said, if that house ever comes up on the market, grab it. It's got a good foundation and a good well. We couldn't afford a house. And Mrs. C owned the house. She had bought it for her son, daughter-in-law, and child, who put heat in, and then he died after the first year. So she lived there alone with the child for several years and decided this was not the place for her. We called Mrs. C, who lived in White Plains.
That's Mrs. C's mother.
The mother-in-law.
Mother-in-law.
And we said, we noticed the house is empty. She says, I really didn't know that. I'd love to see it. I haven't seen it in years, but I have no way to get up there. So Billy was wonderful. He volunteered to pick her up. Showed her the house was in terrible shape. She was embarrassed. And then she went home. He took her home, and a couple of weeks later she called. We spoke, and she said, yes, I'm interested in selling the house. Make me an offer. So I made her an offer of $15,000, figuring she would start at 30 and we would meet someplace in the middle. On my birthday, she called back and said, I really can't sell it to you for $15,000. I spoke to my lawyer, $15,500. So with my heart knocking, I said, I'll have to discuss it with my husband.
What's that? We had heard so many things about the pioneers who set this place up, having great debates, the great debates of the 30s and the 40s, where people would point fingers up in the air if they didn't point fingers at you, and declare all kinds of things that were important in the world. And people, I think, who were attracted here in the later days, in the 50s and in the 60s, heard a lot about these pioneers. We heard a lot about Old Man Saul and his dedication, and you had to have special permission to go to the beach, or he wouldn't let you in. You had to pay your dues. And we heard about Old Man Tiship, who used to sing Italian opera while he was up in your tree, clipping branches, and then he'd deliver all kinds of vegetables for a small price. We heard about all these people, and they were like folk heroes here. But more than that, it was a political haven after the 50s, when we all lived through the 1950 McCarthy period. The 1960s became an open period of what could we do to improve our world, and what could we do to stop bad things from happening or continuing. So we organized in 1963 3 busloads of people who went down to Washington on the March to Washington, to Martin Luther King. And we left here at midnight to arrive in Washington at 9 a.m. in the morning. And we got involved with church groups up here, and we involved many, many people from this community. There was that special quality of when summer day camp began. We had 50 volunteers, all of us parents, who cleaned up the barn and painted and did carpentry work. It was truly a cooperative, intergenerational community with some of the old folks and us newcomers, and that was quite unique. I think that's the climate and the culture of this place that made it special.
I think that makes a critical point, Ken, on this. The intergenerational quality is still there. So some of the kids go out in the world, they make it, they come back. They don't make it, they come back, but they come back. And that's secret. And if they don't come back, they want news all the time. You know, my kids, so wondering what's going on, what's happening. It's a fascinating thing. There's another anecdote related to this. We move up here in 1970. We're not going into reasons why. My son prepares to go to his first day at school. He comes down. I said to him, Eric, please, for you, listen to your father once. Don't do it. He comes in with an apron full of free Angela Davis buttons. I thought he'd be little.
Well, I think he wore the Free Angela Davis button, but I wouldn't let him wear the Impeach Nixon button. And I think that was the point, that you cannot wear Impeach Nixon buttons to this school. And I think the thing about Eric was that here he comes from New York, actually lived in Jamaica, but he's going to Middle Showdown in Union Square, and patch jeans, long blonde hair, and this is 1970, 71, I guess. And he was way ahead of his time, and he comes to this school, which is so conservative, no Jews, nobody wears jeans with patches, nobody wears long hair, and he was like an anomaly. And how he survived those early years is still a mystery, but the business of the buttons, and there's one other story having to do with the McGovern campaign, and if you recall, the McGovern button was a yellow smiley face, and Carla was either second grade or third grade, something like that. And all the kids in school wanted to have the yellow smiley face button. I says, you can give it to anybody who wants it if they promise to wear it. Sure enough, the kids brought him back the next day. No, my mother won't let me wear the button. So they had to get back to McGovern buttons.
Okay.
I think part of what attracted us to come here was, of course, the whole political atmosphere. But there was also the sense of security and the sense of an extended family, that you knew your kids were safe.
That's right.
You knew that, and which is true, because, and they're friends. These kids are still friends. The bond is so strong, not only amongst the kids, but amongst us adults. But it was, you didn't have to worry that your kid was going to get lost, or your kid was going to get hurt on the road. I don't know if you could still say the same thing now, but, you knew that if Leslie walked off and if Pearl saw her, that's okay. We didn't have to worry about that. And it was the feeling of, this is my family. Was really,
were constantly watched. They had 100 mothers, as your son found out.
And nobody took advantage of the fact that your kid was going to be watched by somebody else.
Right.
You would say, I got to go to the bathroom. Can you just watch the kid? But you didn't disappear.
But don't you think that's happening in many conversations all around the United States in a certain way? And isn't there something even, well, in my mind, there seems to be something even more unique about the community. I mean, it was true about what you
felt emotionally about the children, about other people. It wasn't just that you're stopping a kid from doing something. You knew the kid, you knew the parents, you knew pretty much what the parents allowed. Oh, there was one day I'm walking back from the A&P, and going to the A&P along 138 is Scott Moore on his two-wheel bicycle, and there's Kenny Weinstock, who is 2-3 years younger. He may have been 5. He may have been 5. On training wheels, riding, trying to keep up with Scotty Moore. The bike wiggling because he's on training wheels on 138, going to the A&P. And I'm saying to myself, my God, does Connie know what's going on? Now, Scott was old enough to do it, and he rode well. Kenny couldn't keep up on the bike. And I'm debating with myself, do I really snitch on Kenny and get him into trouble, or do I keep my mouth shut? But this is too damn. This is something I don't think I should keep my mouth. Not long, but I debated it. I did. And I finally called Connie, and I tried to make it as...
He said, it's 10 o'clock. Do you know where you're going?
10 o'clock in the morning, and I just saw your son on training wheels on 138.